Okay, good afternoon, folks. Welcome to Smudcast number 469, Howl's Moving Castle, Self-Love. Okay, I don't remember the exact theme of, or specific theme of self-love and Howl's Moving Castle. I'm sure Noralities will figure that one out for us. We'll listen to her and see if it matches up. Howl's Moving Castle, really cool book. Got adapted into Japanese anime in the 90s, was it? I think it was the 90s.
Early 2000s.
Early 2000s? Okay. Great film. Cool book. There's obviously differences between the story, the translation from British author to Japanese anime always has a bit things different. But it's a really cool story. Check it out if you haven't. If you only have a little bit of time, watch the movie. And you'll probably want to read the book if you liked it. It's a really cool story. So this is Noralities, in case you haven't heard it from before. This video came out a few months back in December. Has 105,000 views, and it goes on for about 25 minutes. So shouldn't be that bad. Shouldn't be that hard. I don't think even she can screw this up. This is like a good film. It's easy to watch. The message is clear. A little bit of romance, a little bit of adventure. I think there was some war stuff happening to get the story more excited on the anime, whereas in the book, I think Howl is just a guy. He's just a guy who's avoiding responsibility, and he has a secret door to Wales, and he checks out there to visit his family. Other than that, he stays in his own little world in his book.
I haven't seen this movie personally. I only know that the girl gets cursed to be an old woman.
Yeah,
that's about it.
That's the main thrust of the story, and she has to figure out how to break the curse. That's essentially it. So, classic story, a little bit of romance, a lot of mysticism, a lot of fantasy. Not as crazy on the mythology as Spirited Away, and definitely a lot more British, but also because it's adapted to a film in Japanese anime. It feels very well done. Like they had a certain level of polish that you weren't expecting, which is cool. All right. I hope we're all in the watch together. 25 minutes. Let's get going.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
Everything.
I thought she was blacklisted.
She wasn't. What the
You
hell
wish.
is that?
Howl's Moving Castle has always been an odd film for reasons that I've never been able to clearly put into words. Indeed, this film is the generally agreed upon turning point for Studio Ghibli, where the films being produced shift from being beloved classics into merely good and marks the studio's eventual decline and dissolution. There are
Really?
any number of reasons why that might be.
What?
It may be
Ponyo
that
was
the previous
cool.
Miyazaki
I thought Howl's Moving Castle was pretty good. I don't know about you. It wasn't a decline.
It was really good.
Okay.
I mean, maybe she means that it didn't bring in as much money as the other ones.
Yeah, maybe. I didn't honestly all the
She means
Ghibli
that
films.
afterwards it went downhill.
Maybe.
Can we get the list again, please?
For what the movies from Ghibli?
That she just the
Yes, I
the
was-
release list that she just showed.
Sure, let me rewind it. I'm on the wrong screen. There. So Porco
Yeah,
Rosso,
it-
awesome. Princess Mononoke,
Yeah, that's the old ones.
Spirited
So-
Away. These are all good.
Yeah, that's the old stuff.
Uh,
Tales from Earthsea is crap, but that doesn't count because it's made by the sun, and Miyazaki said it's shit. Ponyo was okay. Arrietty was completely fine. Nothing special.
classic.
Ponyo's also was also one of the ones that Hayao Miyazaki was directly involved in.
right.
So
Yeah,
that's a plus.
Yeah, and it's not like all the movies before were super mega awesome.
Wind
Like,
Rises was fine too. And it has the main character voiced by Smud's favorite director ever,
Oh, really?
What?
Hideaki Anno.
I was just trying to say that as a joke, but couldn't find the name in my head.
Oh.
Really?
Studio-
voice
It's amazing because like he has such a lifeless voice, and he's voicing like the engineer who came up with the the kamikaze airplane model
Amazing.
that they used in World War II.
Amazing.
Just
I mean,
like
Porco Rosso was a very slow movie, and I would compare it to Arrietty.
Studio Ghibli's.
Or was I?
Evangelion.
Am I?
All
I
that.
know Arrietty.
Yeah, so maybe she means business, not necessarily the quality of the film. It depends. We don't know.
Into merely good and marks the studio's eventual decline and dissolution. There are any number of reasons why that might be. It may be that the previous Miyazaki film, Spirited Away, often described as his magnum opus, was just literally too good of an act to follow. It could be that expecting anyone to consistently create more than 5 classic films, each one better than the other over their entire lifetime, is unreasonable. It could be that the animation industry
Everyone
is
has
a
a peak.
shifting, ghoulish creature that devours its creators like a snake swallowing its own tail. But what is it exactly about the film that doesn't work? Upon what is approximately my 20th time rewatching this film, about
What?
an hour and
Movie
10
works
minutes into
fine.
the runtime, Sophie is having a nightmare where Howl has turned into a monster and she's trying to figure out what's wrong and how to help him. And then this happens.
But you don't understand. I love you.
And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. She
Well,
loves him.
is that a dub?
That's odd. Now,
Yep.
a bold declaration of love
Unfortunately.
like this wouldn't
That
be
is
weird in
atrocious.
literally any other film. But one of the things I've always treasured about Ghibli films is that despite many of them featuring leads of the opposite sex, they're never required to become a couple. There's this alleged quote from Miyazaki on his view of relationships that I for the life of me cannot find a source for, so take it with a grain of salt. I actually bought both the ebooks of Starting Point and Turning Point, and it doesn't appear to be in either of those. So if anyone can find the source for this quote, please leave a comment and I'll pin it or something. But it does seem to be an accurate sentiment as it's backed up by this quote
It's
in
called
the Kiki's
friendship.
Delivery Service art book where Miyazaki says that he doesn't think that Kiki and Tombo are romantically involved, and
Oh yeah, because she thinks that every time like people like say like love, it means that they want to be sexually attracted to each other. Yeah, of course. Okay.
Yeah, these are the same people that bitch. Where are the platonic relationships? Why they're all gay?
Mm-hmm.
Is the only definition of love is sexual? Is that her vocabulary?
Yeah. We in previous instances about watching her, we came to the unshakable conclusion that all she understands is eros, which is common for people with her mindset that she cannot comprehend a relationship between two people that is close and caring or inspiring or whatever that is not sexual.
So it's
when
either
people-
asexual or extremely sexual. Lust.
Either you don't like each other or you want to stick your genitals against each other.
What a lovely
There's
relationship.
nothing else. There's nothing else for people like her, which is why people like her believe that all the kids in all the shonen manga or and shoujo manga, everyone who talks nice with each other must want to have sex with each other.
No.
Yes.
Okay.
Then they're either crazy or stupid.
She is crazy. Well, she's also duplicitous, or what's it called, hypocritic? Because she says she's against pedo stuff, but only when it's girls. When it's boys, she draws it herself.
I mean, if we've learned anything from Noralities, that she's crazy on a whole other level.
Well, we haven't quite got to that in this video yet, but we're waiting for
Not
it.
here, but we've seen it before.
We're getting there. I'm sure we're gonna find it. So
It's pretty much guaranteed.
yeah. Okay.
Bloody psycho.
instead will become close good friends. It's not that Ghibli films aren't romantic, though equally many are platonic, but it's just that the only other bold declarations of love appear in the following film, Ponyo and Whisper of the Heart, which is entirely a romance and not directed by Miyazaki. So because of just how clunky that line feels, I double-checked the original Japanese because I know previous Ghibli films have added lines in English that are more explicitly romantic than the original Japanese. And in Japanese, she says, whoa, hold on. Aishiteru, not ski or daisuki. Okay, I should explain. Aishiteru as an expression of love is used much more freely in anime and film than in real life, so it's not completely bizarre that it's used here. And Sophie is dreaming, so this is what's rattling around in her subconscious and not her waking mind with all of her inhibitions fully intact. But
Wait. This is a dream sequence?
I don't remember.
If it's a dream sequence, why are you being so critical of it? It's in her head. It's make-believe. She doesn't actually say that to Howl. It's in her... Unless I forget how Howl communicates, in the movie he can shapeshift, he has magical powers. In the book, he's just a guy with a magical castle when he controls demons or whatever. I don't... I'm trying to remember how she communicates to Howl, but maybe someone can fill me in.
Aishiteru is a very serious declaration of love, and it made me realize the reason this film has always seemed
Okay, so the translation was accurate. Thank you. That's great.
so odd to me is because at its core, Howl's Moving Castle is a love story. It's about two people falling in love with one another and through that love, learning to love themselves. But it doesn't feel like a love story because it's been deeply sandwiched into a war film. Howl's Moving Castle is actually based on the British fantasy novel of the same name, published in 1986 by the critically acclaimed author Diana Wynne Jones. If you're not familiar with her work, she's worth looking into if only because of the influence she's had on other contemporary authors, with Neil Gaiman describing her as quote-unquote quite simply the best writer for children of her generation. And honestly, it's kind of a shame that the novel is often relegated as just the book the Ghibli film is based on, because the writing has an incredible amount of charm and wit. While the film and the novel are both very different in execution and intent, I wouldn't say that one is better than the other. They're both good for what they are and can definitely both stand alone and on their own merits. To quickly summarize, Sophie Hatter, an extremely practical yet unassuming woman, is generally dissatisfied with her life, yet completely resigned to it, when one day she meets Wizard Howl, visits her sister at a bakery, and is cursed by the Witch of the Waste, who transforms Sophie into an old woman. Sophie, not entirely distressed about this sudden change in her life, sets out, makes a deal with Howl's fire demon, Calcifer, and promises to break the curse on them in exchange for Calcifer breaking her curse. Sophie hires herself to work as Howl's cleaning lady, but quickly finds out that the dread wizard Howl, said to eat the hearts of maidens, is really just an absolute disaster wizard and drama queen that throws tantrums and then sulks like a professional baby man. At Howl's behest, Sophie goes to the palace and tries to talk the king out of appointing Howl as a wizard in his army and accidentally runs into the Witch of the Waste. Howl decides to move the castle, and now one of the magic doors leads to a field of flowers and the other leads to Sophie's old hat shop, which they convert into a flower shop. The castle is under attack and the Witch of the Waste tries to steal Howl's heart, but Sophie manages to stop her. Sophie finally figures out that Calcifer is a falling star that is being kept alive through Howl's heart, and she manages to break the curse on both of them while keeping them both alive, and they all live happily together after in a castle in the air. Now, the thing is, when looking at the core story beats, this is more or less what happens in both the film and the novel.
Really?
However, it's not like many adaptations where they start in roughly the same place and diverge further and further until the climaxes are indistinguishable. It's more like the plot loops around off into its own thing before momentarily converging back and then looping again.
Okay, so there are a lot of differences. I don't know how you could say that. There is no war in the book. Miyazaki loved flying, in case you haven't seen his other films. So there's a lot of stuff happening in the sky that doesn't happen in the book. Names, certain characters, the curse, how it works. In the book, she's always an old woman. And in the movie, it alternates. Can't remember how. There's a bunch of other differences I can't remember.
Just in the beginning and at the end.
Yeah, there's enough differences to be. I mean, if you're going to do a video, you should know these differences. Like, that's pretty obvious. But the story beats are not the same. There is no war. Okay, there is no background stuff going on with the kingdom. There's nothing like that. So I don't know. It's like, it's pretty much the same story. It's like, except the setting and all the conflict. Yeah, a little different.
Yeah, this is an adaptation issue.
Right.
But what really makes them so different isn't
By the way, I don't want to spoil anything, but in the comments, I have noticed that somebody pointed out that Miyazaki was trying to like make a comparison to the Iraq War at the time, and that's why the war was in the movie. Is that true?
I wouldn't be surprised with Miyazaki, but you can't pick up on that. You really can't pick up on, all the current events of when it was made, because Miyazaki will turn that into a story about mythical beings and magic and romance, and he'll incorporate.
And he does it.
His love of flying. I don't know why he does that. He just does it all the time. He loves flying, so he'll have all these stories with flying in them.
Yeah, and he puts if he puts such things into the movie, then he does it so vague that it remains timeless. That you will not be able to make the connection unless he would tell you personally, "Oh, that thing inspired me to make this." However, because it is so vague here, I doubt it. I doubt that it's there because of that. I think this is just a world.
Yeah, and
Just
how
a world, things happen. It's a bit like late better medieval times, and with starting technology, and then you just have these visuals there. So that's how the soldiers looked. And there you have it. It's fleshing out the world. That's all. It's an alive world. It's not just oh, we walk through the town and here's a field. No, it tells you that in this world there are things going on beyond the story we're watching, but they don't get to be the focus. They just tell us that this world is bigger than what we see.
all right.
And that is what makes it so. That is what makes these worlds so alive and fresh. Like in Mononoke Hime, you have the conflicts between the different groups of noble houses. You have the industrialization issue going on there, and that's all, which are like founding themes of the setting, but it's not the core of the setting. It's just things that are around. In Sento Chihiro does Spirited Away. I mean, does a similar thing where it is just more contained to the inn, but you have all these implications that the spirit world is much bigger. Like just and the little forest of the sister of the witch is just one hint at that. It's like these worlds are way bigger than just, oh, we have this one place and there's the main characters and they do things. No, you have hundreds of side characters that are just in the background, but they are all distinguishable from each other. And that is what I think makes a great difference to not just Western cartoons, but also to even Hollywood at large, where you only ever seem to focus. This is how it comes across to me when I just roughly think about it. You just have your 3 to 5 main characters, and the rest of the world it comes across as a stage that is just filled with backdrop and not with real people.
All right.
Really the plot beats, but rather the tone and where the emphasis is placed on which events are deemed important and which aren't. While the film keeps the core ingredients of the story, witches, wizards, curses, contracts with scheming fire demons, Sophie's cane, magic castles, the disguised crone, it loses the flavor of why those conventions are used in the first place. Because one of the most important things to understand about the novel is that it is a self-aware fairy tale, meaning the people are very aware of the set of rules that govern their roles in life. And what's interesting about Sophie is that in the film, her arc is about how she isn't beautiful, but page 1 of the book immediately refutes that when describing Sophie and her sisters.
Wait, I'm confused about how she used the term self-aware. They're not self-aware that they're inside of a story.
No. That's
Being
not,
aware of the rules of your reality is completely fine. You should do that when you are an adult.
Yeah.
Are we doing like Deadpool now?
Yeah. She's not Deadpool, guys. Like, yeah, no kidding. Thanks.
I don't really understand what you wanted to say there.
Yeah. She knows she's a hat shop person, and she seems to have some sort of magical power to know whose hat belongs to who in the book. And she has a few sisters. In the movie, I think she just sells hats. I think she's just a person, and she has no sisters as far as I remember.
And she's not related to the Team Fortress universe.
Okay.
Boo.
Yeah.
All right.
In fact, all three girls grew up very pretty indeed, though Letty was the one everyone said was most beautiful. Because in the novel, Sophie's arc is about being a failure. Book Sophie is the eldest of three sisters, which in classic fairy tale convention means that she's doomed to failure. Because as everyone knows, it's the youngest sibling, the most humble and good-hearted, that succeeds in any trial or tribulation, whereas their elder siblings are obviously inadequate. It's why in The Merchant of Venice, the lead casket is the right choice and not the silver or gold one. It's why in the original tale of Beauty and the Beast, the youngest daughter only asks her father to bring back a single rose, while her sisters ask for riches. When you're tested in a fairy tale, the right choice is always, always the most unassuming option, because it's a secret test of character. But knowing with absolute certainty that Sophie is doomed...
The youngest is used in those stories because due to her youth, she is assumed by the listener or reader to the story as the most innocent. She's also the most naive about the world.
Yeah,
It's just
easiest
a
to relate
contrast.
to.
That as well, yeah. That has nothing to do with her being the most pure or anything. That is just due to the nature of the story. But why in those stories it tends to be the youngest that gets the good stuff. It's to be the good character, has other reasons than she's saying here.
to failure before she's even begun has obviously had a negative effect on her perception of herself. It's why she's completely resigned to running the hat shop after her father's passing and has no expectations for the future and allows herself to be exploited for labor by her stepmother, even though she's terribly overworked and tired, and while she's good at her craft, she doesn't find any satisfaction in it. Now, you can argue that the film does still communicate that feeling of listlessness through the cinematography and through the acting and Sophie's body language in the opening of the film. You can see how literally boxed in she is, separate from the rest of the shop and the workers surrounded on all sides by her work. How stifled she feels in the city, stuck in her routine as the train passes by, as it does every day, as it does every hour, pouring thick black smoke into the air and blocking her only window into the outside world. How she's self-isolating herself by making excuses that she has to stay and finish work when she's invited out, but then once they leave, she contemplates work for another moment or two before giving up entirely. I think the film conveys that feeling of isolation and being trapped in one's routine beautifully. However, one of the things that is never explicitly stated in the film, which I feel is a great loss, is that Sophie is, well, actually a witch. And throughout the story, she's unknowingly casting magic spells through absent-minded affirmations. For example...
Wait, did she say she's the youngest or the oldest of three sisters?
Oldest.
Okay, good.
Eldest sister.
All right. I thought she said she was the youngest, but in the film, there are no sisters, as far as I remember.
If she tells a hat it is beautiful, it will become a beautiful hat. That's actually one of the reasons why the Witch of the Waste curses Sophie in the first place. It's to get rid of the competition. Sophie's magic is self-actualizing. If she believes that she's a...
No, she doesn't know about it. She doesn't know she's powerful. She just makes really good hats, and she's kind of bored, and she wants to do something different with her life. It's not like, I'm going to make amazing hats. I know my superpowers. Like, no.
failure and will never amount to anything because of her position as the eldest, and she repeats that mantra to herself, then that's what will happen. Because as it turns out, the rules of this world that the eldest is doomed to failure and the youngest to success is shown from the beginning to not even be true. Sophie's sisters, Letty and Martha, from childhood totally rejected that their lives were already set in stone. After Sophie's father dies, her stepmother comes up with a plan for what's the best career path for each of her daughters. She sends Letty to apprentice at a bakery to earn a bit of money and get married quickly since she won't amount to much, and Martha is sent to apprentice under a witch so that she can eventually set out and make her fortune. To which Letty and Martha both go, hey actually, fuck this, and decide to secretly switch places with each other, and it works! And by the end, they both get what they wanted. Because the roles aren't what matter, it's the strength of will that's important in determining your own fate. Sophie manages to eventually overcome her own curse, but the hardest thing she has to realize is that she's also the one who's cursed herself. Every affirmation and action that reinforces that she's an old woman keeps her as such. Because she is so resigned to her lot in life, it isn't until she's completely run out of other options and backed into a corner after being cursed by the Witch of the Waste that she finally feels free enough to take the initiative in her own life. In some ways, Sophie enjoys being an old woman because it's given her the thing she's never had: freedom. Freedom to live her own life, seek her fortune, say exactly what's on her mind instead of doing what she's always done, which is live up to the expectations of being the eldest. In a way, being cursed was the best thing to ever happen to Sophie because she never would have started living for herself until she had run out of excuses.
That's a journey.
Yeah, she ends up becoming the old woman because she doesn't know what's going to happen in her life. And ba-boom, she's cursed to become an old woman, and she has to deal with that reality. And then it gives her introspection of what to do with her life if she does break the curse, and motivation to not just waste her life away, or whatever the case may be. That's one of the messages.
Yeah, that's a playful. It's a playful dealing with the idea that if you do not take agency, or do you not take the agency you already have in your life, you just and just think, oh, my life's gonna start next year, or after I've done this, or after I've done the next thing, you'll just end up the old person and suddenly you find yourself on your deathbed. And this is the trick here, that because she is just going through the motions, that the curse, as Matt said with less words, is just showing her, hey, by the way, you're technically already old, because you're acting old, but not in a mature way. And she finds her maturation during the curse. After the curse is lifted, she has her youth back, but now is mentally matured. And that's the wonderful thing about this little story. Yeah. I just wanted to say, Ronor Zoro in the chat said the story is not written by French men and French women, were written by the Brothers Grimm, which was showing the dark side of reality and human nature. As not entirely correct, the Brothers Grimm didn't really write the fairy tales they had. They were traveling around and collecting fairy tales, talking to old women everywhere where they went, and writing down their fairy tales. They certainly put some additions here and there, or rewrote little passages. That is probably the case, but originally they mainly gathered them. The one that is close to where they lived was probably a local one. Was the one about Sleeping Beauty, you call it in English, I think. The German would translate into Little Thorny Rose. And that is because in the natural reserve, that is the forest, where that took place, there is even a castle there that is said to be the castle where that story allegedly took place, which is a nice little local mysticism, if you will, like nice local folktale. And the horrible thing about all of that is that the Green Party decided to mow down this natural reserve, ancient forest with centuries-old trees, to build a wind park. Environmental, because I am environmentalism.
Is
But
that prior to the solar panels that were created as well?
I don't know if they put solar panels there as well, but they want to put up the biggest biggest wind turbines in that forest, and therefore want to mow down the forest. And I think this is mainly an excuse to destroy culture, because the Green Party destroys ancient forests. The alleged environmentalist party to build. This is just industrial corruption. It is never about the environment with the Greens. It is only industrial corruption.
Woman, Sophie is the most confident and outspoken she's ever been, because she simply doesn't care what people think of her anymore. It's also given her a fearless devil-may-care attitude, because whatever happens to her can't be worse than her current situation. For Sophie, this curse is liberating, and it's through that transformation that she learns to become more confident and outspoken and gain control of her magic, so that when she breaks Howl's curse, she breaks her own curse as well. I think I prefer Sophie's characterization in the book just because it's more interesting to me. But on the other hand, book Howl is the worst. If you think that movie Howl is a drama queen, honey, you don't know the half of it. The rumor about Howl eating maidens' hearts is because he relentlessly pursues and courts women until they fall for him, and once they do, only then does he completely lose interest and ghost them. Michael, or Markle in the film, Howl's teenage apprentice, has to hide money to buy food to stop Howl from spending it all on useless frivolities. He has a guitar, he's Welsh. Oh yeah, I should probably explain the Welsh thing. Right, so Howl's name is actually Howl, because he's a Welsh man that managed to isekai himself into the land of Ingery and reinvent himself as a powerful wizard instead of just a layabout. So really, Howl should talk and sound like this.
Right, but anyway, here's Wonderwall. I said maybe.
All right.
The fuck?
It's played by.
I thought she would have just played the clip of Mola.
Yeah.
Or it's Christian Bale as the voice actor. He does a good job. I remember that because my brother liked Lauren Bacall a lot, and she's also in the film as the Witch of the Wastes. So I looked at the.
Christian Bale plays Howl.
Yeah. So does he? He's British enough. He's fine. He sounds good. You don't need some other dude. But yeah, in the book, he's a ladies' man. In the movie, he's a wizard warrior person, which is weird, but whatever.
No, just take famous names for voice actors instead of people who are proficient in voice acting, which is something I will never understand. It's
yeah,
they short term. Oh, look, we have famous person in this cartoon thing.
They could get a different or a better voice actor than Bale for sure, but I think Bacall was a pretty good choice for the Witch of the Waste.
I mean, I'm just hung up on the fact that Bale is in a Studio Ghibli film. My mind was just like,
why?
So was Mark Hamill.
Oh yeah.
No, Mark Hamill. That one I already knew.
Voice actor.
Yeah, he's definitely better than Bale. But no, I'm kidding. But it's like I already knew Mark Hamill was in a Ghibli film. I forget what it was, which one it was though. Was it Mononoke or something else?
I think Castle in the Sky or something.
Castle in the Sky. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I just heard this. Heard the girl here in the "I love you" scene, and I was like, "What the fuck was that line? How can you talk like that? You are not a voice actor."
You are
I
not.
got you off the street and gave you $1.
I remember listening to the dub of Princess Mononoke. I'm like, hey, that is a giant wolf lady called Gillian Anderson. And you're like, what? She could do voice acting. She's a very good actress. So I was impressed with her range of playing certain characters. So I don't know how you depict a giant wolf lady, but yeah, she did a good job.
And yeah, Ego Dreamer, I know it's marketing 101. It's just bullshit. Because that way you do not get a long-term, timeless masterpiece that will make you money forever. You will just get your little bump in the profit margin, and that's it.
All right.
And that's where
You gotta be the one that saves me. Well, it doesn't matter anyway. It's fine.
In Chapter 11, they go to Wales to visit his sister, who is not pleased to see him, And it seems like traveling to Ingery was just another way for Howl to run away. While movie Howl gets some slack for being a bit of a baby because he took out his heart as a child, book Howl is about to turn 27, and he only caught Calcifer 5 years ago, meaning that he's just a regular man-child. At the end of the book, there's an interview with Diana Wynne Jones where she's asked about how Howl has charmed many readers and what her opinion of that is, and after listing all of his faults, she says, "My opinion of Howl is that, much as I love him, he's the last person I would want to marry." Now, Howl is literally heartless for most of the book, so judging him on his actions isn't entirely fair, and he does have his good points. He more or less adopted and then apprenticed Michael when he just suddenly turned up on his doorstep one day. He may be brisk and a drama queen, but he never actually turns Sophie out, even when she cuts one of his suits to ribbons. He's kind to others and undercharges poor clients, and if he meets someone cursed, he tries to free them immediately. Actually, he tried to break Sophie's curse from the start, but couldn't because she was cursing herself and wasn't ready to be young again. But when Howl saw her almost have a heart attack and that her joints were causing her pain, he healed her. With film Howl, less is more, and I would argue that the mystery makes him more likable, and there is something so utterly charismatic about Howl's design and expression in the film that it really helps to soften his faults. But that being said, there's something really unsettling about film Howl, and how incredibly self-destructive he is towards himself. He doesn't really eat much. Some of his magic visibly hurts him, which we can see when he wipes the table clean, or when he transforms back into a human, and when he stops a military ship. And I would argue that the biggest change to Howl's character is also the biggest change from the book to the film, which is the importance of war. The film Howl's Moving Castle is overflowing with classic Ghibli-isms. A focus on flying, threatening villains that by the third act have been added into the hero's found family, the relishing in domestic everyday tasks and the beauty of the countryside, the disdain for the pollution that's created from industrial waste, and obviously, war is a pointless, nightmarish horror that only begets ruin. Alright, so you have to understand that Diana Wynne Jones and Hayao Miyazaki are only 7 years apart. Jones was born in 1934 and Miyazaki in 1941, which means that both of them grew up in the Second World War. Jones evacuated from London to Wales when the war was announced shortly after she had turned.
Smud, you have said that like the book has no war in it at all.
Exactly.
Right? But she's talking about the book like it's a fact that it has war in it. I hate how disingenuous she is.
Well, because you're Japanese and a nuclear bomb was dropped on one of your villages, therefore anime was created. So that's how that works.
So
That's
Didn't
enough
she
of
say-
a crime for mankind, yes.
Wait,
does
didn't
the
you
book
say
have
earlier
war
this
or not?
There is no war. There is no war in the story.
There's no war in the book. That's
Okay.
what Smud said.
Anyway, let's see where she goes with this.
5. And obviously, that sort of environment is going to affect one's work. For Jones,
What?
that influence is a distant looming threat of a faraway war told in all of 3 lines. The war could
Oh, so
happen,
there is war.
and that's something that they want to
They mention it in a paragraph. There's some sort of war elsewhere in the story.
Can we go back to that?
Yeah.
affect one's work. For Jones,
His Majesty the King presents his compliments and sends payment for 2,000 pair of 7-league boots, this person said. Another ways to bend his powerful and ingenious mind to a small problem experienced by His Royal Majesty, to wit, how an army might get its heavy wagons through marsh and rough ground. Howl was wonderfully polite and long-winded in reply. The fact is, my brother Justin is a brilliant general, and with High Norland and Strangia about to declare war on us, I can't do without him. This is just background noise.
Yeah, nothing in the story, nothing in the plot, nothing to do with
it just
how.
says, okay, there's politics in the background of this world, which makes it more deep and alive.
Yeah, there's no mention of people fighting or doing things or Howl getting involved. It's not in the book.
Mm-hmm.
that influence is a distant looming threat of a faraway war told in all of 3 lines. The war could happen, and that's something that they want to prevent, but it doesn't have a direct impact on Howl and Sophie. Whereas in the film,
Okay, so she does acknowledge it that it's on.
It's a lot. Miyazaki is and has always been staunchly anti-war.
What
and
a
that aspect
faggot.
of his life has very clearly had an impact.
Yeah.
I don't ever feel happy in my daily life. I'm
I'm still
miserable.
happy about my life. I hate my son. I think
Anime,
like, he's horrible.
anime was a mistake. Yeah, all these things. It's like it's all horrible. Life is
Okay, like some of his movies are actually good, but other than that, I think like he's a terrible person to be around. Like he gives up that kind of vibe.
I think he's just put all his. He's like a magic character in one of his movies. He just took all the good, all the happiness and joy out of his heart and made the movies out of that, and now he has nothing left inside of him, and has become a total nihilist.
So Alan Moore.
He sold his soul to make wonderful movies for children to make them smile, and that's his legacy.
You know, the funniest thing is people compared him to Walt Disney.
Wow.
How's that funny?
The fact that Walt Disney hid his smoking habits, this guy didn't.
I don't see the joke.
One's a clearly bitter old man. The other guy's just trying to put up an image. This guy, there is no thing there. That's just in everyone else's head.
I mean, both of them are just stealing others' ideas and trying to like make it bigger and better in their own way. So it's kind of similar in that way.
And again, Disney's dead, so.
But soon Miyazaki is gonna be dead as well.
I don't think Miyazaki's making anything new these days, is he?
Nah, the 2013 movie was his last movie.
Yeah.
He's not making any more. His son continues the company.
I think most of the Ghibli movies are more what was the word I had in my head? Fleshed out, consistent, rounded. Because I with lots of the Disney movies, I have issues where things don't add up, things are missing, the pacing is all over the place. There's the animation is in part really good, and then in the other side it looks like it was with the more modern ones.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? That looks like shit.
Yeah, for Miyazaki to take
Miyazaki's consistent.
To take war and just, hey, we need some action in here. Let's have some bombs and planes. I could see it because of his love of flying and that he'd tie that together. So it makes some sort of sense that a creator would want to do that. But it's not essential to the story. It doesn't really add anything. It's just a background thing it looks great because it's just bombs and planes and cool magic stuff. And
other thing with Howl's Moving Castle is that it is mainly girl got cursed, okay, and now she's going through the motions in the castle, and things are happening, and the dwarfing is one of the things that are happening.
Nothing to do with her. Nothing. Very little to do with Howl, aside from him just helping the king wage a war that he's just tangentially connected to. It's like, all right, it's in the way. It's a hurdle that they happen to come across. That's about it.
Yeah, I don't think it makes the movie less.
No.
Impact on his work. Watching any Miyazaki film post knowing that he survived being bombed at age 4 and that some of his earliest memories are of bombed out cities creates an extreme unsettling feeling of discomfort. But
Why?
the film Howl's Moving Castle is entrenched
because
most of those people from the era have experienced war.
Yeah.
It's like these Westerner young ladies have this idea that like, oh my god, there's people who survive wars. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Like there's an entire generation who grew up on that.
Yeah, go to Saudi Arabia, go to any of these Eastern countries. Children have lost brothers and sisters in war. It's a way of life in some cases. So
yeah, and it's not just the Londoners or the Finns or the Polish. You can say the same thing for the Germans. But I don't.
Entire Europe was fucked up from the war.
Especially with these firestorms in cities. But I doubt she would have much compassion for that.
All right.
In war. From the opening shots of the city on May Day to the ship sailing away only to return as wreckage, the casual cruelty offhandedly mentioned that the king uses magic shields to protect the capital, which causes bombs to fall on civilian homes instead, to Howl literally losing his humanity when he fights in the war, to Sophie watching a bomb drop on her. It's heavy, and it feels out of place with the rest of the film. These are two separate stories fighting for center stage. Is this film about the people, or is it about the war? And the thing is, earlier Miyazaki films have...
No, it gives us more comprehension of Howl and who he is and how he acts and why he's the way he is.
It's fine. It's not,
and why he's absent so much as well.
Yeah, it's not the worst idea to incorporate this with Howl and his powers, but it does the job. It makes it very animated and fun to watch. I don't think you needed it, but it makes it more exciting for sure. Bombs and planes and things crashing and magic spells and yeah, sure. Armies, big booms.
Bombs are great.
Yeah. Magic goes boom.
Have aspects of war, and it works there because it's woven into the fabric of the story and main character's motivation. In Nausicaa, the war works because her entire motivation is about protecting her village and her people and the toxic jungle from being invaded and destroyed by the repeated misuse of atomic power through the hubris of man. Conversely, in Castle in the Sky, Shida and Patsu just want to quietly live their lives, and they can't until they stop the repeated misuse of atomic power through the hubris of man. The war works in Princess Mononoke because Ashitaka is an outsider desperately trying to find a middle ground where these three warring factions...
So he can stop atomic power from destroying mankind. Is it gonna be that? Please tell me.
Could just stop trying to destroy one another by the repeated misuse of atomic power through the hubris of man.
Oh God!
Obviously, this
what
is
the hell?
Very personal.
What the hell? How can you?
There was nuclear power in Princess Mononoke?
That was a tortured forest spirit.
Exactly.
You just showed us. You just showed us the Ainu version of Carnunos.
Let me rewind that. I'm quite sure there's no nuclear power in Princess Mononoke. I think it's all about a curse that the guy gets on his body from a boar king or something like that. And
yeah, that has nothing to do with humans.
What is?
Not in that sense. They didn't create some super weapon.
Yeah,
no,
they're fighting with
they
swords.
They have firearms, but that's it.
They don't have nuclear power here.
The god isn't a nuclear power device that the bad guys are using against the... What the fuck is that?
It's actually they are firing on a uranium mine. That's why it's like nuclear power.
Your metaphor, your comparison does not work the way you want. She wants to make the super weapon comparison, but you cannot use that with the god of the forest.
And even though like Miyazaki survived the bombs, okay, it doesn't mean that his entire life is going to revolve around like surviving those things.
Yeah,
like, people tend to move away from those things and become like something else than that.
When you're allowed to.
Well, he was very, very much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we know that, as she said herself, we know that Miyazaki was against nuclear war, nuclear power, and all that wonderful stuff that he's traumatized by. Good motivation for him to do his stuff. Great. Yes, he does talk about it in some of his films, not in Princess Mononoke. So, no, thank you, Miss Noralities.
No thanks, Miss Crazy.
Warring factions could just stop trying to destroy one another by the repeated misuse of atomic power through the hubris of man. Obviously, this is something very personal that Miyazaki deeply cares about. I can't fault him for that. In earlier films, the war aspect is more directly wrapped around atomic power. But in Howl's Moving Castle, we see modern Western warfare play out in a way that's uncomfortably familiar to Western audiences. And that's not a coincidence. In 2003, when Spirited Away won an Oscar for Best Animated Feature, Miyazaki refused to attend the 75th Annual Academy Awards because he was protesting the recent invasion of Iraq by America.
Great.
And Howl's Moving Castle would be released only a year afterwards. In Miyazaki's words, "The country had just started the war against Iraq, and I had a great deal of rage about that. So I felt some hesitation about the award."
Yay,
In fact,
politics.
I had just started making Howl's Moving Castle, so the film is profoundly affected by the war in Iraq.
Affected
So,
does not
yes,
mean that he
that's
deliberately
literally
put
the
everything
point.
on.
The war appears
in
out of
that.
nowhere and is horrible and unfairly affects.
So, so that you don't misunderstand me. It does not. What I mean to say is, it does not mean that Miyazaki made the movie deliberately about war. It's just that elements of that came in to flesh out the world because that's what was going on. It is a completely common thing that when you're writing a story, that things that are going on around you, whether they happened in your past, whether they're going on right now, do worm their ways in through inspiration, or at least or make connotations in the story. It's a completely normal thing. And with him being affected by that, yeah, sure, why not bring that in? The stupidity of, which is the stupidity of war. The Iraq War was a very stupid war, which we later found out was founded on lies again, once more. Of course he's pissed. We're all pissed. The Americans were pissed.
This is the same argument for anyone making any kind of art in the past 2 years. I was affected by COVID. It doesn't mean you actually put a pandemic in your story, or you have someone affected by a virus or some mutation. It's just everyone's affected. It's motivation to do stuff. That's all he's saying. He's not saying, I'm angry at the Iraq war. It's like, so I made a story about anti-war stuff. Like, okay, but you always do that.
Now, Miyazaki at least does it in a good neutral way, where it's just, okay, there's war, people die, explosions, everything's shit. Okay. It's not in a this side good, this side bad thing usually.
Yeah, if it's connected to the main
Just
plot.
a general was dump.
If it's connected to the main characters in some way, then I'm like, all right, good job. In this case, it's tangentially there. It's in the background. It's in between scenes where we want to get to. That's kind of the problem
It's just
with
a part of the world.
Yeah, it's kind of a problem with these sort of non-Disney animated films. They're just big. And if it's not specific, like A Spirited Away, where it's everything's a magical creature surrounding the bathhouse, or the environment and the condition, it does feel like filler. It does feel like it's just tacked on, as attractive as it is. Obviously, it's very well drawn and voiced and what have you, but it still feels like, all right, it's fine, doesn't hurt. It just doesn't help too much either. Doesn't flesh out Howl too much. It could be a lot better in that regard. Anyway.
The lives of these people, because that's the point Miyazaki is trying to make to audiences. And he did this intentionally because he wanted to alienate American audiences. I understand that. But I'm sad that this book about love was created into a film whose existence was motivated by feelings of rage. And this is why
So?
I think
No.
Howl's Moving
So what?
Castle and
You
later
overinterpret
Ghibli
again.
films like Ponyo are weaker.
Even if that's the
Influence
case,
the movie, but it doesn't make
Yeah.
the movie made by rage. What the hell is
Even
wrong
if that's
with
the
you?
case-
Do you only understand one emotion at a time?
yeah, even if that was the case for the motivations of the creator, that doesn't come across in the story about this girl trying to break a curse. She's not angry or pissed off at the kingdom and the fantasy world. She's stuck there, so she can get rid of the curse, and that's part of the hurdle. Why are you getting angry at Miyazaki for having an emotion to motivate himself to make art? Why? That's like getting angry at Neil Gaiman for losing his journalist job, so he has to force to write to pay the bills. It's like, oh, I was going to starve. I'm so sad that Neil Gaiman had to force himself to become a writer as opposed to being a journalist all this time. It's like, okay, why? He was still writing in the
Neil
the
really
background.
hated sand, so
Yeah.
he decided to write about Sandman.
You interviewed so many people on the beach. You got an idea. Oh,
The beaches of California.
yeah.
Than some of the older films.
Because this is supposed to be an internal conflict.
It is the story of Sophie and Hal learning to love themselves despite their faults and becoming comfortable being who they really are. Howl has spent his entire life running from himself. That's what all his magic and his spell work and his vanity are hiding. It's that deep down, he doesn't care for himself. That's why his house is a mess, yet his outfits are pristine. Every problem Howl either runs from or throws magic at it to fix it, which is not a long-term healthy solution. Sophie doesn't have any confidence in herself. She would have just wasted away her entire life in that hat shop if she hadn't been...
It sounds like the typical male way to deal with problems, which is work so long until you have processed it. It's not necessarily running away from it. You can interpret it that way, but it is traditionally how men deal with having problems, conflicts, whatever. While what women classically tend to do, on average, is they talk and talk and talk and talk and talk about it, but never do anything about it.
You could see the story of Sophie, like what she has to go through. The end result, it becomes a romance, but it's not about romance. It's about her figuring out what she's going to do, and it's through the curse that she has to deal with it, and she learns about that herself through that process. So that's fine. I mean, that's part of the main story. Howl is just the helper, the helper / hinder of what she has to go through and figuring herself out. And does she care about this guy? And yes, of course she does, but how? And he's a bit crazy and he does his own thing. And in the movie, he's all over the place. Self-love? I don't know. Maybe I was too young at the time to figure that out. He's fighting a war for a kingdom he doesn't partially care about. He's jumping between worlds. He doesn't like killing in general, and he realized what he's doing is basically war profiteering. So, in the movie at least.
Literally forced to change who she was.
I mean, if you want to talk about, the war aspect, that would really mess anyone up. So I think I'd have to rewatch the film to see exactly how that affects everyone or the main characters, but that would be an easier, obvious conflict to deal with, of blowing away your enemies and killing them and coming to the realization, yeah, I killed a bunch of people at the behest of another man who happens to be the king. That is an unnecessary form of conflict. They didn't have to go that far, but Miyazaki, he wanted to tell that story. So you see how the adaptation argument works in some cases, and it doesn't, because, yeah, it was a beautifully done story. It looked very good, very well animated, but it's taking away from the actual problem of the two main characters and what they're trying to figure out.
And in the end, it's only because they start to care for each other that they're able to slowly change themselves. Hal becomes less selfish and vanity-obsessed because he's finally found someone he cares about more than his desire for self-preservation. And Sophie absolutely refuses to let Calcifer and Hal burn themselves up into nothing. She's determined to save them both no matter what, and that gives her the strength to change from a passive observer in her own life, trapped in a coffin of hat boxes and foul city air, into an active, powerful witch that can protect the people she loves. Their love for each other is what allows them both to finally feel beautiful in their own skin. Not because being loved fixes them,
That's a strange way to
being
put it.
loved by someone is the first step into being able to love themselves and wanting to become better because of it. That transformative quality of love is what changes them both, and I love that in the film you can see that change visually reflected in Howl and Sophie's design in the beginning and end of the film. Howl, with his glassy marble stare, ostentatious jacket, and all his ruffled finery, and Sophie looking for all the world like a background character, gray and reserved and like she could fade away at any minute. But they both change because they both become at home with who they really are. Howl stops hiding behind his oversized wizard's robe, his silhouette becomes free and clear, and his hair, which he spent so much time previously altering and literally threw a tantrum about, goes back to being his natural color. Sophie's dress becomes a vibrant blue, her hair silver, and she even gets the "I'm a Ghibli girl who's self-actualized and becomes stronger now that my hair along with my previous self has been cut away." She stops hiding behind the excuse that she's a failure or not pretty enough or too old to be loved and in love. And the war aspect overwhelms the story it's supposed to be adapting in the first place. Once you've read the original story, it sort of clicks into place that if you remove the war, the story should be about an internal conflict with one key external dilemma that needs to be overcome in the climax. That way, the film could have been like Kiki's Delivery Service or My Neighbor Totoro, or even have had similar vibes to that in Spirited Away. I wish that Miyazaki had just picked different source material, because I don't think we'll ever get another adaptation of this book now that the Ghibli film has become the definitive version. Even though part of me knows that's silly, because
Never say
I
never
know the Ghibli
when you have
film
Amazon
is
and
directly
Netflix.
responsible for making the novel a bestseller, and without it, I, like many people, might have never even have heard of the book. Diana Wynne-Jones unfortunately passed in 2011. And while she did seem to enjoy the film, she sums it up better than I could. Miyazaki's film is sumptuous and full of unbelievably wonderful animation. I loved it when I first saw it, even though he had distorted my story in order to introduce all the war machines he is so fond of. Closing thoughts. I should make it clear, I don't think Howl's Moving Castle is a bad film. I would actually say that it's pretty good. Even a flawed Ghibli film is still like A tier. The opening of the film in Sophie's hat shop and meeting
Why'd she
Howl
make
and
this
Sophie
video?
seeing Howl's place and being
Yeah,
like, damn bitch, you live like this, is all excellent. And I love seeing older women represented as the star of their own film.
Oh my-
I love the older ladies of Ghibli, and Granny Sophie getting to be the main character for the majority of her film is incredibly
Represented is the wrong word as
refreshing.
well.
The shelf life of a Hollywood actress is like 40, and then you're typecast as a witch or someone's mother or aunt for the rest of eternity. There are plenty of film-only changes that are excellent, such as the Baba Yaga-inspired cobbled-together monstrosity of the castle, and the staircase climbing scene is obviously iconic. This video has actually given me a lot of closure on figuring out why this film has never sat right with me. I initially set out with the script with the plan of specifically not talking about the war aspects, since I think that angle has been covered more in depth by Breadsword and Movies with Mikey, which, if you're interested, are both excellent videos and I would highly recommend. But by the end, I realized I couldn't separate the two aspects, and that was the point. Again, I highly recommend reading the book if you haven't already. Diana Wynne-Jones' writing is so charming and funny. However, I wouldn't recommend reading the book too close to watching the film, because although they are very different, especially further into the plot, some sections like Sophie making breakfast on Calcifer are verbatim lifted from the book, and that can make for a disconcerting reading experience.
Why?
What?
Thank you to my patrons.
Wait a second. A one-to-one adaptation is disconcerting? Why?
I'm confused now.
What? As you said, why did she make this video?
Wasn't she complaining about changes in the adaptation?
She said the war was bad, I didn't like it, and that's what always did not sit right with me. That's why the movie is not that as good as it could be. You're like, okay. Because the book was purely about romance? Maybe. I mean, that's one way to take away the attention of something, is to add another element, but it's not inherently wrong. It complements a little bit of Hal's character, why he's the way he is. And if they worked with that, the horrors of war and what Hal has to go through, which I don't remember, it could happen in the dialogue, I don't recall, then great. That would have worked well on why he is the way he is. I never got that from the movie. I thought he just was doing it because the king asked, and he's a nice guy, and he takes requests, and he gets paid, and all that jazz. Other than that, this is a nothing video. This is just her going, yeah, this is a video, and this is the book, and this is what happened. And you're like, okay. Yeah.
What a waste.
I think like she finally figured out how to like make videos for normie audiences.
That
because
in the top
she
left,
reached like that 100k sub count. It's just perfect introduction.
That in the top left that says red is hopefully not overly sarcastic red.
Something tells me it is.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but oh god.
This is the only meme we have from Mateus. It is Howl, and he's got some flag superimposed.
It's the Welsh flag.
It's the Welsh flag? Okay. I have no idea. It's a cool book. It's not anything spectacular. I like these styles of stories just because they are romance. I usually don't read romances, and for it to appeal to kids is also that whimsical element of magic and fantasy. And you get a lot of that from the British authors. So it works out okay. It's easy to read. It's not hard.
I do know, because she mentioned that Miyazaki has like grief with Americans, and I do know, but because I have read into it that like Miyazaki outright hates Americans
Yeah.
because
Oof.
it's just like he just doesn't like the culture. He hates like all these modernizations as well. And like there's all points that I agree with him, but like he's just very general, like he outright like refuses to like even like associate with them. Kind of like what his has with nuclear power and all its connections as well. Just like he just says like in a statement that I just don't want any of it.
All right.
He's a very strange old man.
He's an interesting character, yeah. Here's Joe Crazy. Thanks for the 5. Howls was generally well liked by Americans when it came out. Don't know what she means by alienated Americans. We don't know a lot of what she says. That's fine. It's typical Noralities. She says weird things.
She probably believes that all Americans love war. And therefore, if you show war to be bad, then Americans must dislike it.
Yeah.
Which is nonsense.
Anyway, that was Noralities. One of her better videos, I'd say probably her best, because she didn't say anything insane.
Bad?
She didn't call anyone like bigots or
nothing
phobes.
Perverted.
Yeah,
nothing.
it's so strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, she didn't put in everybody wants sex or something as well.
Yeah, no, barely. Just a few little bumps that we were expecting, like the brief mention of love relating to sex and the war element not being incorporated right, or if you expand upon that a bit more, like give us examples in the story where it's a problem and why we can understand her more.
You just leave out this little bit of stuff, of crap, and suddenly it's not total shit.
Yeah, we still don't know why she made this video. There's nothing really here to get a
probably
to pay the rent
video
to make
just for rent.
I guess, I don't know. Anyway, guys, thanks for the suggestion. That was Weeb Day or Anime Manga Day on Mondays. Keep the suggestions coming. We're busy doing our own stuff in the background, as you know we are. I have to talk to you guys later, so keep them coming. Talk to you soon.